Rennie Pena, the former Northern Cheyenne tribal president, sat in a Billings courtroom for the 2-day trial. It was the middle of December 2021. The defendant was a man whom she'd known his entire life, Jerard Three Fingers. He was on trial in a district courthouse for involuntary manslaughter, accused of unintentionally killing his longtime girlfriend, mother of his children, and Rennie's neighbor, Christy Woodenthigh. Rennie anxiously awaited the verdict, and after just 45 minutes of the jury deliberating, the decision was in.
Hi, Rennie, it's Bo. Can you hear me?
Yes. They found him not guilty.
Rennie left the courthouse, got in her car, and drove the 2 hours back from Billings to the Northern Cheyenne reservation. And on that drive, she called us and described what she saw.
What did Jerard do when they announced the not guilty verdict?
Put his head down.
Not guilty. The moment Rennie heard those words, her heart sank. She told us that it felt like Christy's case was now just another example of a justice system that had failed countless other Native families.
Just like they said, if you're going to get away with murder, go to the Northern Cheyenne reservation.
Rennie was angry. And that phrase, "you can get away with murder on Northern Cheyenne," was a feeling she and others in the community shared with us before. But regarding the trial, all she could think about was one thing: the Bureau of Indian Affairs federal agents. Going into the trial, Rennie thought Jerard would surely be found guilty, but that quickly changed when she heard the testimony of the 3 BIA agents and how poorly they handled the case.
They dropped the ball. I can't believe how it went through 3 officers, and for them to go to all those years of training and knowing how to do this and that, and yet you still get in the vehicle without gloves on. They had no reports, no BAC, no blood samples, nothing.
So she wasn't surprised the jury didn't convict Jerard.
Well, I just believe justice hasn't been served. And it's kind of sad because you rely on the justice system to be there, you know.
Throughout the trial, Rennie dressed in red and wore a beaded pin to signal support for the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples crisis. Christy's death and her family's struggle was now a part of that crisis. Community leaders, members of the tribal council, and the Northern Cheyenne president didn't want to lose another member the way they lost Christy. A tragic death and a bungled investigation. And the results of that trial left Northern Cheyenne tribal leadership more motivated than ever to take action. But none of their solutions ever seemed to be enough. The tribe felt there was no other option but to take on the United States government. From CBS News, I'm Cara Cordy.
And I'm Bo Erickson.
And this is Missing Justice, Episode 5, The Northern Cheyenne Tribe versus the United States. Christy Woodenthig's case wasn't the start of this community's frustrations with federal law enforcement. Mistrust in the BIA runs deep on the reservation. So a few months after Christy's death, the Northern Cheyenne tribe took a big step in an effort to try and improve public safety and law enforcement on their own. The tribe hired a law enforcement expert, a man named John Grinsell.
Hi there. Nice to meet you. Bo, nice to meet you.
Hi, John. I'm Cara.
Sure.
Thank you for having us.
John was hired to set up the NCIS, not to be confused with the criminal drama TV show, but the Northern Cheyenne Investigative Services. John's ultimate goal is that one day the tribe will investigate crimes on their own and not the BIA. John's focus is to help protect the tribe, to look out for them and keep them safe.
John is no outsider. He grew up here on the reservation and is an enrolled member of the Northern Cheyenne tribe. So he's intimately familiar with the struggles the community has had with BIA law enforcement. And not just because he lives here, but because he used to be on the force. John was a BIA agent for more than 20 years on Northern Cheyenne and across Indian country. At one point, he was even the police chief here. We met him at his office on the reservation.
When you walk in, you immediately notice all of the commendations in John's office, including the Attorney General's Award for Exceptional Service in Indian Country, which he received when he retired in 2020. Well, sort of retired.
I retired from the Bureau of Indian Affairs May 31st, 2020. On June 1st, 2020, I came to work for the Northern Cheyenne tribe to assist with their law enforcement program because they were just so frustrated with the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
John was brought on by tribal leadership to essentially have his eyes and ears on the BIA. So in his new role, John monitored Jerard's trial closely, and he was one of the first people to call us after that verdict. You're not doing too good? Yeah, we heard about the lack of the blood alcohol test to 3 fingers. We heard about the BIA officer driving the car without gloves down to the station. I imagine that is not operating procedure.
No, absolutely not. That is insane.
To John, the verdict in Christy's case was horrifying, but not surprising. This is how things go on Northern Cheyenne, he told us. If people wanted real change, they needed to address systemic underlying issues within the BIA.
We wanted John to explain to us how the mistakes made in Christy's case could happen. Things like writing reports or collecting evidence from the suspect seemed so obvious. But John wanted us to understand that the BIA agents on Northern Cheyenne, the ones on the stand who investigated Christy's death, are working under really difficult circumstances. He said there are 3 fundamental problems within the BIA, and those problems impact law enforcement here. The first is that there simply aren't enough BIA officers.
I came to work for the Northern Cheyenne tribe, and at that time, I believe in 2020, they had like 4 officers, and they're supposed to have 19. Now they have about 8 police officers.
We spoke to John after the trial. Earlier this year, we obtained a BIA staffing document that says there were 10 full-time officers on Northern Cheyenne. But as of this summer, tribal leaders said the reservation should be assigned 20 officers by BIA management. However, at that time, tribal leaders said only 3 of those positions were filled and currently working.
And it's important to remember that the Northern Cheyenne Reservation is huge. It's roughly about the same size as Houston, Texas. If you drive in 0 traffic north to south across Houston, that alone could take at least an hour. So imagine only a few officers having to cover all that area.
But if there are 3 officer positions filled and currently working, that doesn't mean 3 officers are working all the time. They work in shifts. So a fraction of the whole force is on call at any given time. And one practical problem resulting from not having enough BIA officers to patrol the reservation is that there are long BIA response times when tribal members call for help. And tribal members told us that sometimes officers don't respond at all. On the flip side of this, John said the lack of cops puts even more pressure on the BIA officers.
When you answer a call and you have 3 calls behind you, you're trying to clear that call quick. And so when somebody's trying to tell you their story and try to sit there and say, well, you know, this and this, you're as a police officer, you got 3 calls behind. You're like, can you just get to the point? And you look like you do not care. But here, there's 3 calls behind you.
John said the officers are rushed. The tribal members who called are in distress, and they're mad the officer has taken so long to arrive. And all of this escalates the situation, the opposite of what police presence should do.
This possibly had ramifications in Christy's case. When we were at Jerard's trial, 2 officers said on the stand that they didn't write police reports because they had to go back out in the field and respond to incoming calls. So understaffing is detrimental here. But it seemed like the solution was pretty simple. If the BIA needs more officers on Northern Cheyenne, why not just hire more?
This is when it's important to remember that BIA police officers are federal agents, which means if someone wants to be a BIA officer, they have to be hired through a federal process that can take a long time.
It takes quite a while. It takes almost a year for background checks.
It takes so long because federal background checks are so strict, but it's asking a lot of someone applying for a job to wait a year for it. And it should be noted that Native applicants are given preference in the hiring process to better ensure that the workforce of the BIA law enforcement reflects the Native communities they police. And John said it takes just as long for these applicants to go through the background checks.
Now, the second major issue is resources.
Like the Northern Cheyenne Jail. In recent years, the local BIA jail was closed and then reopened, but with limited capacity, and now only holds those arrested for public intoxication. This decision was made because the BIA didn't have enough people to run a fully functional jail.
And remember, we learned during the trial in last week's episode that Jerard's SUV was driven to this facility, where it was parked outside in the parking lot.
So that limited capacity means that if a Native person gets arrested for something other than public intoxication, the BIA officers have to take them to the nearest BIA correctional facility, which is an hour off the reservation.
An hour's drive each way, which means any time an officer is arresting someone for something other than public intoxication, they're not answering any calls for at least 2 hours. And we were told by John that BIA officers really have to consider these logistics when they arrest someone. Do they have the time to drive 2 hours in the middle of a shift?
And this is all taking place during a time of heightened crime on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. According to tribal records, reported violent crime on the reservation increased 50% from 2019 to 2020.
Okay, so understaffing was the first major problem. Less than ideal resources is number 2. And the third problem, John said, is something called detailing.
This is actually supposed to be part of the solution. Detailing is the BIA process of reassigning officers from one reservation to another that's in need of more police assistance.
You're basically on loan to the reservations that need additional support.
Exactly. When you sign on to be a BIA agent, you're signing on to be sent away from your home base for days or months at a time. Officers can be detailed multiple times throughout their career. And being ping-ponged around from reservation to reservation comes with its own set of unique challenges. For one, you have to learn the new tribal laws of that reservation. But you also have to learn how to get around because you're new to the community, and that can be pretty hard.
When you don't have street signs, when you don't have addresses in these rural areas, the directions are go north on this highway, you'll see this white sign. Here's a picture of this white sign. Turn here. My house is the brown house with the big handicap ramp in front of it. So you get a lot of directions like that. And so the community starts asking, where you been? How come it took you so long to get here?
This process of detailing, moving officers around, even came up during Jerard's trial. All 3 of the BIA officers said they worked in multiple states throughout their careers, and one of the officers said he patrolled different Native reservations in 6 different states.
So every day, all of these issues snowball together on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. And the result, John told us, is serious tension between the community and the BIA officers.
In my opinion right now, there is a lack of empathy for the community. And that is, they do not participate in any community events. A lot of the people don't trust to call the cops, call law enforcement for different reasons. And if you don't know the police officer, when we worked here, we knew most of the people.
But John made it very clear to us that he's not blaming the individual BIA police officers for this dysfunctional situation. He blames the BIA regional and national leadership for not addressing these problems.
I'm very pissed off, yes. Here's an organization that I've worked for 25 years. And these policies or these decisions being made by the higher-ups just don't make sense to me. Don't make sense to me at all. And so that's very frustrating for me. And to see my community, to see the crime happening in my community and there's very little to nothing I can do about it is very frustrating.
You don't sound hopeful for the future.
No, because of the people in charge right now, I don't have no hope in. No hope in. We've been fighting. I've been in this fight for 2 years. There's some that have been in here longer for 4 years. And very little to nothing has changed. So yeah, I don't feel hopeful.
So John is providing his law enforcement expertise to tribal leadership to better understand and hopefully solve some of the problems on the reservation. But that's not all the Northern Cheyenne community is doing. The tribe says it has spent over $1 million of its own funds to address the lack of law enforcement. Part of that funding went to security checkpoints set up to keep tabs on the community. When John was chief of police here in 2006, he actually had his BIA agents running checkpoints. But now, these checkpoints aren't staffed by BIA agents. Instead, they're run by Northern Cheyenne residents John has hired.
John took us to the checkpoint in the middle of town. Checkpoint staffers yell out license plate numbers of passing cars and log them so the tribe has a record of the people coming and going from and through the reservation.
CHY 061, Explorer 1, no belt.
John said if something were to happen on the reservation, the tribe can use these logs to figure out where someone might have been and when. On top of that, John said he trained these volunteers to keep an eye out for any kind of suspicious or dangerous activity around them. Some of these staffers here told us that folks in the community will come to them to report crimes rather than calling the BIA for help. And that's not all. These checkpoint volunteers also keep tabs on the BIA officers. This checkpoint in particular was set up about a block away from BIA headquarters.
We're out here about 10 hours a day.
Shalena, one of the volunteers we met, told us what she's seen.
We see the BIA police about 4 times a day.
Why? So only 4 times a day?
I have no idea. So I'm not too sure why it takes them so long. One time we heard gunshots and we had to make the phone call, and it took them probably a good 2 hours to even respond. They said they'll send the nearest officer, and it just took them that long to even come through the checkpoint. And then sometimes they'll tell us there's no officers available, but where are they if they're not available?
Shalena told us that the reason why she's standing out in the cold, wearing 3 pairs of pants to keep her warm, is because she's giving back to her community by trying to hold the BIA accountable.
Even though John told us he believes the checkpoints keep the community safer, he said checkpoints alone are not enough to overcome all the law enforcement issues on the reservation.
Do you think, John, the lack of officers, the lack of resources, is that something that a quote-unquote bad guy could be aware of? That if I'm trying to get away with something, I know the right time to do it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's people here that know the system better than the officers do. There's people here that know that the jail's closed. Yeah, they know exactly. They know exactly when to commit crimes, when not to commit crime. I don't know if I should say this. They know exactly when you have your high times and when you have your low times in terms of how many police officers are on. They know where my security checkpoints are at. They know how to get around my security checkpoints.
So after everything that happened in Christy's case and other cases like hers, after all the things the tribe had done to compensate for issues with BIA law enforcement on the reservation, tribal leaders still felt like they needed more help, more resources, and less dependence on the BIA law enforcement in order to keep their people safe. We asked the Bureau of Indian Affairs to respond to the community's concerns, but they didn't answer any of our questions. This overwhelming sense of desperate frustration pushed the Northern Cheyenne tribal leadership to take an unprecedented step. In July 2022, the tribe announced they were suing the United States federal government. In the Northern Cheyenne tribe versus the United States of America, the tribe lists the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Department of the Interior, which oversees the BIA, as defendants. The tribe claims the United States breached its solemn fiduciary duties to the tribe by failing to provide adequate law enforcement services. We wanted to find out why and how the tribe came to this major decision, so we reached out to Northern Cheyenne's current president, Serena Weatherelt. She told us that it was Christy's case and those shocking details that came out in the trial that, in part, inspired the tribe to take this step.
It was emotional, and it was a shock, and that just was the underlying element of knowing that our law enforcement was not doing their jobs.
Weatherelt and the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Council wanted to take the most serious action they could.
Serious, but not sudden. Earlier this year, the tribe followed up on a series of letters sent to BIA leadership asking for more assistance with law enforcement.
They had 60 days to respond to us, and 60 days came and went with no response whatsoever. Our hands were tied, and we couldn't go any further, so we had to do something to be heard.
And so, when they didn't hear back, tribal leadership filed their lawsuit in federal court.
The goal of the lawsuit is to force the federal government to commit more resources for patrol officers and local detention facilities, meaning more money to protect the Northern Cheyenne people.
You know, we need a full staff of professional, competent law enforcement officers that will patrol and quickly respond to calls for service, not with just a partial staff with a high turnover rate and no investment to our community. And these problems have been going on for many years.
And while it's not a small undertaking to sue and litigate against the federal government, Weatherelt does have some hope.
We are a strong and proud people, and a lot of people are interrelated here, and we all try to stay together. We do have a lot of resiliency. We try to stick together, and I think that's the best thing that we can do as a people.
The reason why a Montana tribe with a reservation of about 5,000 residents is suing the U.S. federal government is not just because Northern Cheyenne is policed by federal agents. It's because the federal government has a legal responsibility. This is part of what's called a trust responsibility to keep federally recognized Native American tribal members safe.
This goes all the way back to the founding of the United States. Between 1787 and 1871, the U.S. government signed nearly 400 treaties with Native tribes. In almost all of them, as the government took land from Native tribes, it promised the tribes sovereignty, other remaining land in return, and that the United States would protect their people and provide for their well-being. In fact, the government specifically signed treaties with the Northern Cheyenne tribe, including one in 1868. In that treaty, the federal government promised peace and pledged to protect the tribe from, quote, bad men and punish any offenders according to U.S. law.
The legal rigor behind this trust doctrine goes all the way to the highest levels of the American judicial system. In 1942, the U.S. Supreme Court said that the government has charged itself with moral obligations of the highest responsibility, which is why the Northern Cheyenne tribe is suing the federal government for breach of trust.
Weatherelt told us she doesn't take this decision lightly.
We're wondering, as tribal president, do you feel safe?
Actually, no. What can I say? There's just no law enforcement. You know, it gets frustrating. And talking about it really brings that out of me. I think it was time that the Northern Cheyenne tribe had to stand up and do something about it because it is affecting our people. It is unsafe and it's so insecure without having law enforcement present on our reservation.
So, Cara, we've been told this is a major move by the Northern Cheyenne tribe. But this isn't the only tribe experiencing law enforcement issues.
In fact, we spoke to dozens of other tribal leaders across the country, from Montana to Arizona, North Dakota to Oklahoma, and we heard the same details, like a broken record about problems with federal law enforcement agencies and how they're detrimentally impacting lives on reservations. Through all of those conversations and more than 100 interviews, we've gathered countless questions from the communities that live with these issues every day. But one question was repeated to us more than any other. What are the federal leaders in Washington doing to fix this? Next time on the final episode of Missing Justice, we take our investigation to Washington, where we track down the leaders tasked with keeping tribal lands safe.
And at the end of the day, and I have said this over and over and over, when it comes down to the brass tacks, nobody gives a about Indian country but us.
And finally, we'll hear from Montana Senator Jon Tester on what he thinks Congress can do to solve this crisis.
There's an issue of trust with law enforcement. There's an issue of trust with the BIA amongst the Native American people. And we've got to figure out a way to break down those walls, too.
Missing Justice is a CBS News podcast. This episode was reported by me, Cara and Bo Erickson. If you want to get in touch with us, email missingjustice@cbsnews.com. We wanted to thank the Northern Cheyenne people for their hospitality and for sharing their stories with us. This project was also reported and produced in part in Washington, D.C., so we wanted to acknowledge that we work from the ancestral homelands of the Anacostan and neighboring Piscataway and Pamunkey indigenous peoples. Dr. Iris Prettypaint, a member of Blackfeet Nation and a descendant of the Crow Nation, worked with us as a sensitivity reader. She has over 45 years of experience as an educator and is a leading authority on cultural resilience with American Indian and Alaska Native communities. Steve Razies is the Executive Vice President of Podcasting and Audio at Paramount. At CBS News, Ingrid Cyprian-Matthews is the Executive Vice President of News Gathering, and Mark Lima is our DC Bureau Chief. Our production partner is Neon Hum Media. At Neon Hum, our executive producer is Jonathan Hirsch. Our senior producer is Joanna Clay. Liz Sanchez is our associate producer. Stephanie Serrano is our associate editor. Original music by Asha Ivanovich. Sound design by Scott Somerville. Additional tracks from Epidemic Sound. And our fact checker is Naomi Barr. Thanks for listening.